All right, so I hope you found that helpful. One of the things that I find most interesting about that is the confirmation of the role that support plays, right? When an individual is going to court, when they're navigating things that they never navigated before without their common coping skill, it's so critical to have support with someone there to help stand somebody up and say, you know what, you're going to be okay. We're going to get through this together. How can I help you? One step at a time. And, you know, it's a challenging process, and it's not something that an individual has full control over. It's the brain sending messages. Another reason for return to use, it's because, and I touched on this in module 2 with behaviors, is the behaviors or the lifestyle becomes part of the addiction. And so for any individual, regardless of what the conditions or the circumstances of their lifestyle are or were, those patterns become part of the addiction. And for someone, for example, who experienced domestic violence for however long, the longer, the more severe. They become conditioned to that behavior, and then when they get put in an environment where that condition no longer exists, it doesn't mean that the person just necessarily snaps out of the familiarity of being in that lifestyle. That would be impossible. It becomes a process. So for someone who was in the criminal justice system, learning how to live in a world where they're not a number is a process. For an individual who's addicted to drug use and has been in an intimate partner violent relationship, being removed from that relationship and learning how to live without being constantly degraded, constantly told what to do, those are ingrained behaviors now. And they have to learn how to replace those patterns of behavior with new, healthier patterns of behavior. And if you can imagine what that must be like for one individual who's experienced so much, and society demands it should change in an instant. We have unrealistic expectations. We've placed unrealistic expectations on these individuals. Invisible reasons for return to use. Some of the things that can directly influence return to use are someone's daily living skills. I happened to have good daily living skills. As I mentioned, my alcohol use, drinking alcoholically, didn't start until I was 42 years old. So I had good daily living skills. I had pretty good coping skills. The reasons that those deteriorated are quite lengthy, and I won't get into that right here, but I did have to learn how to find myself a valuable individual worthy of different love, if you will. Coping skills, education. Once again, I had a pretty decent education. I had writing skills. I had reading and computer skills. But folks, some people don't have these skills. And then they're faced with going out to get a job, right? Because they have to replace their drug use behaviors with something, and they don't know how to read or write or use a computer. And imagine how challenging that is for an individual to say to themselves, I don't have any skills to go out and get a job, and yet I'm supposed to go get a job. Now, clothing can be an issue. Something as simple as clothing can be a major setback for an individual. I can remember when my sponsor took me to Goodwill because I didn't have any money, and we had to buy some clothing for court. Most of my clothes were donated after I had been dramatically removed from my home of 20 years. I didn't have any clothes. And not only that, whatever clothes that I did manage to retrieve didn't fit me because I had lost 20 pounds because of stress. hygiene skills, criminal justice, health issues. Taxes is a really big reason, I tell you folks, for people to return to use. Some individuals with substance use disorder haven't paid taxes in who knows how long. And the idea of getting a job and having your paycheck attached to the IRS is futile. Why would I want to do that? Why would I want to live my life like that? So we have to help people find solutions to the barriers that exist. People, places, and things. We're going to watch a movie about that coming up. Friends, environments. I can tell you a story about, I used to live down in Florida with my father in certain times, and I would go over to Dunkin' Donuts at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'd do some work on the computer because I used to manage websites, and I would do that until 8 o'clock in the morning. My father didn't have Wi-Fi at his home, so I'd go to Dunkin' Donuts, I'd sit there for 3 hours, and as soon as that hour hand hit 8 o'clock, I was right over to Publix grocery store in line getting some wine. By 8:03, I was drinking wine every morning. And so for me to continue to visit my father, I had to replace that pattern of behavior. I had to do something. I had to go home back to my father's house at 7:30 instead of waiting there until 8 o'clock. So that's a very subtle behavior change, but it's one that can help people traject into sustainable recovery. Courts, finances, housing, all of things are major life circumstances that many folks with substance use disorder are lacking in, and they all cause stress, and they all lead to return to use. It's overwhelming, folks. This is Dr. Bill Hanning. He's on the website for Pleasure Unwoven with Dr. Macaulay. And I am going to stop my share and we'll take a look at this excellent video from Dr. Bill Hanning on return to use.
One of the impediments is a failure to recognize that, like any other chronic relapsing disorder, progressive relapsing disorder, this requires a lot of patience in the entry phase, and it requires an awful lot of commitment to the longer term recovery phase. You don't get somebody who has diabetes, give them a syringe and some insulin and say, okay, go forth, get well. And by the way, that's it. We don't need to see you anymore from this point on. You know, they have not been recovered. They are entering a period in their lives where they will have to make enormous adjustments. And then, in fact, if you look at the diabetic and see how he got to your office and into the treatment role in the first place, or in the patient role, it wasn't a matter of immediate acceptance. The last thing they wanted to be was diabetic, because they're going to lose their eyesight, they're going to lose their limbs, they're going to lose their kidneys. There will be a loss of all of that is important to them in terms of function and maybe job and being able to do the stuff they wanted to do and staying alive to raise the great grandkids and so on. They don't accept it readily. Anybody who thinks that folks come into that particular chronic progressive relapsing disorder and are just suddenly accepting of it and grateful for the treatment has a distorted view of that illness state. And yet it's not all that different from what happens with alcoholism. So what we do ideally is try to get people first to accommodate gradually to the notion that they've got an impairing disorder and it's going to take an awful lot of effort to get well. And that once they are actually on the ascendant route to recovering the life that they wanted to have back when they started using at age 15 or whenever it was, they've got a lot of ongoing maintenance to do. Used to be a time when you could buy cigarettes in bars from vending machines. Okay, well, excuse that example again, or better yet, just the basic 7-Eleven. Okay, you go into a 7-Eleven, your intent is to pick up something reasonably benign like a package of Twinkies, and lo and behold, locked up behind the cashier register, all these cigarettes, and right next to the cigarettes happen to be the alcohol. Okay, but you're still smoking cigarettes, you buy cigarettes from there. At some point along the line, you may inadvertently fall drunk, if you understand what I mean. And so the that goes into your relapse prevention plan, which is, I guess, for this time and place, 7-Elevens are not a good place for me to be. I'm just going to have to write that out of the range of places that I can go. If I had vertigo, I would not be a mountain climber anymore. It's just not a safe place for me to go. I can't go into 7-Elevens for a little while here, and that gets written into the relapse plan. It's called subtle behavior because of the mnemonic that it is seemingly unimportant behavior that leads to error, SUBTLE. And at some point along the line, you begin to recognize which ones there are, and you write them down. And like most other good orderly preparations, it protects you.
All right, so that was Dr. Bill Hanning. I hope that you enjoyed that video and explanation of subtle, seemingly unimportant behavior that leads to error. And I love how he talked about, we have to just stay away from 7-Eleven for a while in a reuse prevention plan. So seemingly unimportant behavior that leads to error for somebody, and these are just some of them. The behaviors can be in abundance. Like I said, the lifestyle becomes part of the addiction. Always missing work, stealing, lying, fighting, blaming everyone else, in and out of jail, neglecting daily responsibilities, poor hygiene, leaving their kids alone, neglecting children in intimate relationships. These are some of the glaring behaviors that can lead to error, but there are many, many subtle behaviors that need to be considered when moving someone into drug use goals of reduced drug use goals and improved well-being. There's only one thing that needs to change, they say in the halls of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that is everything. Imagine what that's like. You have to change the way that you get up in the morning. You have to change the first thing you do in the morning. You have to change the way you dress. You have to change the way you shower. You have to start eating in a different way because chances are you really weren't concerned about your nutrition before. There's only one thing that needs to change, and that's everything. It's impossible expectations and locus of control. If I'm suffering from substance use disorder, especially severe substance use disorder, my decision-making skills are impaired. I have very high shame, very high guilt, very low self-worth. This mountain that society is imposing on me to get better quickly is too high. I can't do it. My cravings and obsessions are owning me. And you know what? I'm very comfortable with failure. I'm very familiar with that. Like I said in module 1, our brain likes to be comfortable. And we're going to lead right back to where we're comfortable if we don't have support, encouragement, and a good plan. There's no way out. It seems like there's no way out. That's why people return to use. Let's look at some considerations for successful recovery management. There's got to be some willingness, okay? Now, an individual in early recovery might not make the best choices, but they're willing to keep trying to move beyond the mistakes. There's potentially some trauma in their history that they either have to work through or somehow map out at what point are you going to work through that if you are willing to do that. Maybe there's a traumatic brain injury. What kind of support do you have? What kind of people are you surrounding yourself with that are going to pick you up every day and help you navigate through life 24/7 without drinks or drugs? Education. Are you getting any education around addiction? Resources or ability. What kind of tools do you have? What kind of insurance do you have? Do you have transportation? Do you have the means to get a job? Do you have the clothing to get a job? Do you have the resources, therapists, medication-assisted treatment? Whatever the need is, do you have those resources? And if not, how can you get them? Do you have a plan? What's your plan to replace your old patterns of behavior with your new patterns of behavior? And small goal setting. When we set people up with lofty goals, such as you're going to discontinue your drug use today for the rest of your life, expectation is too high. A more manageable goal might look like, can you discontinue use for today? Can you make it through today without drinking or drugging? That becomes more manageable. They're called small, manageable, attainable goals. Hey there, this is Ginger. I hope you're learning a lot from this series. I'm asking for your help in supporting my tireless efforts. There's a few ways in which you can support me. Tell your friends about this video series, subscribe and like each video here on YouTube down below, make a donation on my website, or invite me to deliver this training in person. Together, we can all be part of the solution. Hope to see you soon, and thank you.